to my night terrors. If you enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing to my channel to show your support. With that out of the way, please enjoy this story. I don't usually travel by myself, but I couldn't find anyone willing to go with me on this particular road trip. I have a huge fascination with Native American history. I love to go out in my free time and visit old Indian dwellings and check out the many petroglyphs and pictographs around the Southwest. Ever since my parents took me to Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado as a child, I have been drawn to them. It's almost like a spiritual experience for me. This would be my first trip to the state of New Mexico. I was going to Chaco Culture National Historical Park. From what I have seen online, it looks amazing. It's full of many ancient ruins of the ancestral Puebloans. The only downside, though, is that it's basically out in the middle of nowhere, accessible by a 20-mile-long gravel road off of Highway 44. As I turned down this road in my camper van, it seemed fine at first, at least for the first few miles. It slowly turned into one of the worst roads I've ever been down, a washboard nightmare for miles and miles. If you're not familiar with the term washboard, it's like driving over speed bumps, one right after the next. It's what can happen to unpaved roads if you don't grade them. I was getting knocked around pretty hard, so I had to slow my van down to a snail's pace. At this rate, I would be lucky if I could make it in time to enter the park before it closed for the day. When I did finally make it to the park, as luck would have it, it was closed. The visitor center was locked up. I drove in past it to find a closed gate. I would have to camp out on the BLM land somewhere surrounding the park, so I circled back to a secluded-looking canyon a few miles back. I drove in about a quarter mile and stopped. This would do. I could camp here. I shut off the engine and stepped out of the van to breathe in the crisp desert air. The sun had begun to go down. I was pretty beat from driving all day, but I wanted to see if I could climb up the canyon and see the surrounding area. Perhaps I might be able to see some of the ruins that were out here. I had a little daylight left, so I grabbed my flashlight, just in case I needed it, and started to hike up the canyon. I made my way as high as I could before it became a little too sketchy for me to go any further. I couldn't see much anyways, so I decided to turn around and just head back. I hadn't gotten very far down when I froze in my tracks. Not far up in front of me looked like the hind legs of a coyote, possibly even a wolf. They were huge, sticking out just past the huge boulder. The rest of the animal was obscured. I hurried and pulled out my flashlight and shined it in its direction, my heart beating fast. It then moved behind the boulder, becoming completely concealed by it. I picked up a decent-sized stone and hurled it in its direction, hoping to scare it off. Nothing happened. I didn't hear anything. I swallowed hard and slowly walked to the boulder. I had to get past this to make it back to the van. I slowly looked around the boulder. There was nothing there. Just then, I caught a glimpse of a light glow up the canyon, coming from behind some rocks, just up from where I had turned around. It was starting to get brighter and brighter, turning into a fiery red. I then heard what sounded like a pack of wolves howling, coming from the same area. I started to run down the canyon as fast as my legs could carry me. I was overcome with fear. I was about 10 feet from the van when I noticed the sliding door was open. I stopped suddenly, visibly shaken. I slowly, with my trembling hand, lifted my flashlight and shined it on the door. To my horror, I saw what looked like human handprints on the windows, human handprints made out of blood. I then slowly turned my flashlight to the inside of the van. I took a step back, almost dropping my flashlight. There inside the van was a wolf, covered in blood, just standing there looking at me. I then heard what sounded like someone yelping, then another, and another. At that moment, I about leaped out of my skin. This wolf began to stand upright, its torso elongating as it did so, its front legs growing out, becoming human-like as it grabbed onto the van's door. Its head slanted down, started to split right down the middle, from the top, spilling blood down its body and off the van's interior floor, mixing with the desert ground. I didn't stick around to see what was going to happen next. I started to run and make my way towards the visitor center. I started to hear its howling as I ran away, only it wasn't a howl of a wolf. It had a very distinct demonic tone to it. I about pissed my pants when I heard it. I didn't look back to see if it was chasing me. I just kept running to the center. When I finally reached it, I noticed the campground to the right of it, tucked away near a cliff face, and then I spotted an RV parked in the front. It was the only people here, it seemed. I started to bang on the door repeatedly, yelling for anyone to please open the door. My heart sank. There was nobody here. I then took off my shirt, wrapped my fist in it, and punched through the door window and unlocked the door. I went inside, my arm bleeding from the glass, and crouched on the floor. I peeked out the blinds to see if this thing was out there. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. After a few hours, I made the decision to make my way to the visitor center to see if they had an emergency phone of some kind. My cell phone wasn't working out here. As I stepped out of the RV and made my way around it, there it was, towering over me, twice as tall as it was before in the van. This part wolf, part man/demon looking creature. Its eyes were very human. Its mouth was huge, its fangs glimmering in the moonlight, its legs still very much wolf-like. It was completely bizarre and terrifying looking. It then looked down, directly at me, its eyes penetrating my soul. Its mouth hung open, streams of saliva pouring out down its face. It then let out an ear-deafening howl, like it did when I ran away from it earlier. I fell to my knees, completely paralyzed in fear. I began to sob like a baby. I started to beg for my life, groveling at this creature's feet. When I looked up to a brilliant display of light, this thing had disappeared, and now before my eyes was a giant blue and white orb of light, almost completely blinding me. And then, in the blink of an eye, it shrank into nothing. It was just gone. I stood up, wiping the tears from my eyes, shaking terribly from fear. I had heard of the Skinwalker's curse before, but never believed in that kind of thing and always laughed it off. I would never laugh at such a thing again.